Rev Don, and this is going to be my new program that I'm going to be doing daily. And I'm hoping to talk to all of you about all kinds of different things. Today, I'm going to talk first about what I'm going to be doing with this program, and then a little bit about some aspects of my life that you might find interesting, and one of my more recent projects, the Super Omnibus. But first, let's talk about the program. This program I'm envisioning to be about half an hour long. Some days it might be longer, some days it might be shorter, and each day will have its own focus. Um, Thursdays in particular will be interview day, and tomorrow will be an interview with the Archpriestess of the Aquarian Tabernacle Church, Belladonna Laveau, and I think you'll find it a very interesting interview. I have known the leaders of the Aquarian Tabernacle Church for 40 years. And because of that, I think I can ask some questions that perhaps someone else might not ask. And I think you'll find the interview very interesting. Lady Belladonna is very personable, and she is, I think, a very good interview, uh, in addition to being very interesting. I want to say hello to Janet in the chat room. Thank you for joining us. And next week will be an interview with Jason Mankey, also a very interesting personality. And then following that, we'll see who else follows. Some of these will be new interviews, like the two that I've just mentioned. In some cases, I'll be drawing on older interviews because, I've been doing video for decades, and I have interviews with some very interesting people, some of whom are no longer with us in the physical world, which I think, even though they're older interviews, will still be interesting for people who have not seen them. Other days, I'll be talking about different subjects, holding forth on different matters of interest. Sometimes I may be talking about events coming up, projects I'm involved in right at the moment. My most recent project you may be familiar with is Rev Don's Super Omnibus of Magical Incantations and Invocations for All Occasions by myself and Sir Mary Ann Kay. And this is the collectible version, which is available in a limited run of 125 copies. And those of you who have bought it, I hope that you are enjoying it. And I want to say hello to Matthew in the chat room. Thank you for joining us. There are a few of these still available. If you are interested, drop me an email at donlewishp@aol.com. They are very collectible. They are a hardcover version, and they're one version of the omnibus. There's also a special version that was created only for the Corellian High Priesthood, which is substantially the same, but also different in that it does include certain things just for the High Priesthood. And if you're interested in that, send me an email. It is not available at Corellian Publishing or anywhere else except directly through me. And it is a wonderful gift for a new high priest or high priestess, or someone who is already third degree or better. And Janet tells us that she got hers, and I believe that she was quite happy with it. She's waiting now for the Tarot of Hecate to be restocked, which I am hoping will happen later this year. And then the newest thing is the paperback version of the omnibus. And this is available for $19.99. You can find it on CorellianPublishing.com. If you're interested in ordering in bulk, send me an email. We can work that out. And this is the less expensive version of the book. And as you can see, it has all the same artwork in it, all the same spell work in it, and every page has both art and spell work. And so, and Matthew tells us that they have the paperback version and they love it, and thank you. And so if anyone else is interested, go to CorellianPublishing.com. We also have many other things there, and many new things will be coming. I think most of you know that I recently had a health situation which has somewhat refocused my my life and activities, and a lot of that will be focused now on publishing and writing, more so than previously. So watch for some new offerings. I wanted to talk also a little bit about my life up until now. I've been having questions from some quarters about um, how long I served as first priest of the Corellian tradition. I'm still one of the first priesthood. I am retired in office, but I took on that role at the age of 15, and I spent my life in it. But it was only really in the last 20 years that it became as consuming a job as it became. And before that, I had a lot of other things that I was doing. I was much more involved in artwork and publishing, but primarily I was involved in the psychic arts. And in the 1980s and 1990s, if you heard my name, it would have been as a psychic in most cases. And I spent many years working as a psychic. And I think this is probably one of the things that I will talk a good bit about, maybe do some readings for people. Probably not today, but in future programs. And also every Thursday night, I do Tarot Thursday here on Pagan World TV with the Reverend Mary Hawk. So if you're interested in seeing me reading in action, you can see me there. Janet mentioned the Tarot of Hecate. I've designed several tarot decks, and this is because I've been reading tarot since I was nine, basically 9 years old. Reading it professionally for in excess of 40 years. And I had a lot of adventures as a psychic. I did tarot reading, I did psychometry, I did straight clairvoyance, I did seances. And some of the seances I've done more recently, but I will probably be doing more of them in the future. And I don't know if you who are watching this are particularly familiar with actual seances, but they're not necessarily what you would see in the movies. In the movies and in stereotypical representations, seances are very oogie boogie. Everything is dark. Everybody must hold hands and close their eyes, and all kinds of nonsense that is not necessary in reality. In reality, the term seance means sitting. It's a sitting for spirits to speak. And Janet says she went to a seance. Um, and when you do a seance, if you know what you're doing, you don't need any of those things. You don't need it to be dark. You don't need um, really any of those trappings to do it. Now, some of them might be helpful, but it depends on the circumstances. I have done seances that lasted 2.5 hours or more. That had people sitting more than one row deep. I've done seances in theaters where you had a whole amphitheater full of people. Um, and I've done seances online where no one was in the same room. So the idea that you must all be holding hands, that's not true. The idea that it should be a dark room, that's not true either. Um, it can be helpful to have a candle lit, particularly if you're learning. But if you're accomplished at the art, you really shouldn't even need that. You should just be able to go. One of the things that people often do with the psychic arts is they make them harder than they really need to be. And I want to say hello to Bradley, who has just entered the chat room. Good to see you, Bradley. And so I'll be talking a lot about the psychic arts. I learned a lot over the years about how to be a professional psychic. I used to work for the D&H Psychic Fair Circuit. I used to work for the J&M Psychic Fair Circuit. And I worked for a couple of others along the way. I used to work as a psychic in Salem for a time. And I will tell you that the best training to be a psychic is the harder situations where you think it would be difficult to do, because it is. But once you've learned to do it in those circumstances, everything else is easy. I remember, and I often tell the story, when I was working for J&M Psychic Fairs, we had a group of house psychics, home psychics, who picketed the fair one day, trying to say that you couldn't get as good a reading at a psychic fair as you could by going to someone's home for a private reading. And Reverend Marlena, who was running the psychic fair, invited them in and spoke to them. And she explained that in her point of view, and hello to Rebecca in the chat room. Thank you for being here. But Reverend Marlena explained in her point of view that they were exactly wrong, because, in your home, you can set up everything just the way you want it. You can have your special music. You can take as long as you want. You can be in your familiar surroundings. And not to denigrate that, But the idea that that is a greater skill than reading under duress, she strongly disagreed with. The people in the psychic fair were surrounded by noise and activity and people coming and going, and yet they still gave very good readings. And to know how to do that um, is the mark of a really good psychic. And hello to Mark, who has just entered the chat room. And thank you all for joining me. Uh, I found I found really that a lot of things that the average person would think either could not be done or would be difficult to do are actually very easy once you learn how. In Salem, we had a bit of a controversy when we offered 5-minute readings. We had people saying, well, you can't get a good reading in 5 minutes. They were wrong. But you have to know how to get right in and get right to the important things to do a good reading in 5 minutes. And you don't learn that in 5 minutes. You learn that through experience and by working with people who know how to do it. And I am looking at doing a lot more psychic teaching this coming year and a lot more work with the psychic arts. And Janet says, yes, that is why I don't read much publicly. It's a skill you have to develop, and that's absolutely true. Um, and it's very different reading for yourself versus reading for someone else. It can be very challenging to your ego to read for someone else. Some of the things I learned early on, and I'm so glad I had good teachers. Um, I was taught that whoever comes to you is who you're meant to have, whether it seems like it or not. And I found that is true. I've I was taught that if it seems like you're not hitting for the person, just keep doing the right thing because it doesn't mean you're not actually hitting for them. I had all kinds of people who looked totally unimpressed through the reading and then at the end said, that was great. But they were totally unwilling to give it away until the end because they thought that if they showed that you were hitting well for them, that this was somehow um, not appropriate. So you have to trust what you're getting to be a good psychic, whether for yourself or for someone else. And that is the hardest thing, to trust what you're getting, to not try to analyze it while you're getting it, but to bring it through. And then you can analyze it to your heart's content. I had people, one of the stories I like to tell, I had a woman come to me at a place where I read every 6 months. It was one of the psychic fair places where we only went once every 6 months, maybe once every year. It's been a long time now. But she came to tell me that the year before she had come to have a reading with me. And I had told her certain things that she did not believe were possible. She wasn't really impressed by it. Um, and she specified one, which I had told her she would have a trip crossing water within a certain period of time and that this would be important for specific reasons. And at the time, she was saying to herself, I have no reason ever to cross any water. I'm not going anywhere. I don't know anyone who fits this bill. But a year later, she came back and said she was going over the water to visit her sister for important reasons, but that were basically what I described. And it suddenly dawned on her, oh, yes, this did work out. And she was kind enough to come and tell me this. A lot of times you never hear after the fact how well you did or did not hit. So you have to trust what you're getting. But usually you'll find you hit pretty well if once you know what you're doing. Um, but it is all skill. One of the things I dislike is when people say it's a gift. It's not a gift. Psychic ability is not a gift. Artwork is not a gift. Musical ability is not a gift. These are all skills. Um, some people do have more aptitude than others, and perhaps that is a gift. But learning the art is a skill you have to work to do. It is never something that just suddenly appears in its developed form. Even people who have natural psychic ability still need to study it to be able to do it well. There are things that you would not. Well, I actually think that native psychic ability that comes without having to work to develop it can actually be a detriment because if you haven't had to study it, you don't know what you don't know. Most important thing of all, if you want to be a psychic, if you want to learn psychic work, is grounding. Clearing, releasing your energy and grounding yourself. The number one thing that must be done. I was fortunate to have been trained as a Correllian priest, which strongly emphasized grounding. But when I was first working in the psychic fairs, most of the people I was working with came out of a different background. Many of them were spiritualists from spiritualist churches that did not practice grounding at all. And you could tell the difference. Um, After a certain number of years, they were often extraordinarily ungrounded. Hello, Mary. Thank you for joining us. And Bradley says your exercises going through first degree have made such a difference for me already. I'm so glad to hear that. And one of the things we really emphasize there is that aspect of clearing and releasing. Um, and yes, those exercises they are the best exercises I know. They're the ones I was trained with, and I highly recommend them. And you can find those in our first degree book at CorrellianPublishing.com. You can find them at witchschool.com. You can find them at magictv.com in video form. But it's very important to have that development as a psychic, and you must ground, because if you do not clear and release and ground, what's going to happen is you carry the other people's energy with you after the reading. Um, Most people watching this have probably heard about psychic vampires, um, which do exist, but the truth is we're all a little bit psychic vampire. Everybody exchanges energy in the normal course of life, but some people have a tendency to absorb far more than they're giving. And that's usually what we mean by a psychic vampire. There are some people who do this intentionally, but they're very rare. Usually it's someone who's just in need of a lot of energy. Um, and in fact, Michel Belanger, who is one of the leading authorities on the subject, once explained to me that this is actually a wonderful art form if you know how to use it. That a person who has that excess of yin energy, which is what we're really talking about, can be a wonderfully skilled healer if they learn how to use it to take the excess energy that some people have difficulty getting rid of. Like everything else, it's a matter of finding what it's good for. Everything can be good for something. Now, Janet says that she loves using our world tree exercise for grounding and illumination visualization. And the world tree, I think, is an excellent exercise. And, I'm very proud to say that we provided a lot of resources for people over the years, and many of them will come, I think, through this program. I think we'll be bringing new resources to people, new teaching to people, new ideas, hopefully, to people. Um, and it's my anticipation that each day is going to have its own focus as I get to know what people want. So if you would be kind enough to tell me what you would like to see from this program, that would be very helpful to me. And I will take that into account as we put it together. I figure there will be days when people will have questions. There'll be days when I'll simply talk, as I'm talking today, about being a psychic. Days when we'll have video from different sources. We have a wide range of things we can do. As you may know, for a solid decade, I did a daily vlog where I took questions. But in this case, I'm thinking more about taking single subjects and expounding upon them, rather than short form questions, because I'm expecting to use about a half an hour per broadcast. Coming back to being a professional psychic, as I was saying, a lot of the people who did not understand clearing and releasing and grounding were very ungrounded. They were often very nice people, but you could tell that they desperately needed to ground their energy. They often seemed to be about a foot off the ground, to use a phrase that was often used. Um, some of them had lost touch with reality, which is a big danger if you're not clearing and grounding. Um, People love to talk about the dangers inherent in psychic and magical work, and they're usually talking about things that really are not a matter of concern if you're well trained. But losing your connection to reality is a significant danger under certain circumstances. But if you're well trained, it will not happen. So if you look at our psychic exercises, it starts with those very simple things: clearing, releasing, grounding. It goes through all kinds of shadow work that will help you to have your sense of self very strong as you go into this work. And that's what you need. Now, Mary asks, what do you say to people who believe psychics should not charge for their work? Um, well, good luck being a psychic. I totally disagree with that idea. Um, and I think you get what you pay for. So I strongly discourage the idea of not charging for either psychic or magical work. And there are a couple of reasons for it. And I want to say hello to Reverend Michael in the chat room. Thank you for joining us. Um, One of the reasons I think you should charge for psychic work in particular is that if you want to become a good psychic, you need to read for a lot of people. You need a lot of practice. You're not going to get that for free. Or if you do, you're going to be giving up a lot of your life for no recompense. Generally speaking, psychics don't charge outlandish amounts of money, but you should be recompensed for your time and for your skill because you're not going to learn this because you woke up one morning and knew how to do it. It takes really years to learn to do it well. It takes months to learn to do it, but it takes years to learn to do it well. And of course, you should be charging. Now, if it's your close friend, maybe not. However, the other thing, people only value what they pay for, and recent events have made that even clearer to me than it already was. But because of my years in the psychic field, and also watching things in the wider metaphysical community, I very much am of the point of view that people value what they pay for. There's more than one way to pay for something, but if you're giving away free, they often don't take it very seriously and they don't value it. Um, and you can see that by how they treat it, how they treat the people who are supplying it. And so I think even a token charge is better than no charge. Now, Julia asks, what if you're a beginner? That is different. And if you're just beginning, then I think it's probably best, at first, probably not to charge. But once you feel that you're becoming proficient, then I think you should. Um, and again, one of the reasons is that people will take your time in large doses if you're not charging for things they don't really need or value. But if you're charging even a token amount, they'll be more respectful of your time and of the information they're receiving. It helps them. The best psychic I ever knew was a woman named Rosemary Fletcher. And Rosemary had this same point of view. And she said that she felt when a person paid for a reading, it was their seed money. It was money they were putting down to indicate their belief that, yes, they could have what was coming in that reading. And that when people didn't do that, they took the reading far less seriously. And I believe she was quite correct in this. But if you are just learning, if you're still reading from the tarot book, for example, that probably is the point where you should be doing free readings to develop that beginning skill. But then you should move into charging even a token sum. Um, for the last many years, I've not even been available for readings except occasionally for charitable events. And this is one of the reasons because people will take so much if you let them. And so my answer to that is absolutely charge. And if you think about psychic workers through the ages, and if you think about witchcraft through the ages, they weren't giving it away. They were almost always charging something. Sometimes it was not in cash, but they were charging something. And that, as I say, it's the seed money. It's the recompense for your time. And if you're really going to do this, where you're making it a career, you have got to live. And exchanging readings isn't going to pay your bills. Um, Doing it for free will not pay your bills. And so you have to think of it, if you're going to make it a business, you have to think about it as a business. If that's not what you're doing, then it's a different matter. If you only read occasionally for friends, well, of course you don't have to charge them. But I think it's actually beneficial if you asked for something. But as a beginner, again, that's a different question. Um, but I can also tell you, as someone who's trained psychics, a lot of people think they're beginners well after the point that they really should be charging. And we, for example, used to have classes where we'd teach people how to do this, and then we would introduce them to professional reading. And we did not wait a long time to do that. We just waited until they had developed enough skill that they could do it, even if they were just learning to be confident. Because the only way you'll learn confidence is by doing. And I think people underestimate the importance of doing. One of the things you hear a lot in the pagan world is that when you first become in paganism, you should read everything you can read. I have never given that advice. I don't give it now. My advice is do everything you can do. Go out, meet people, do things, find out what's really there, because half the time you read the book, when you get into your local community, it's not what you're going to find anyway. It's much better to go out into the community, meet the people who are there, learn what they're doing. Because of the internet, you can learn from people all over the world. And I'm a great believer in doing more than simply studying. And with psychic reading, it's the same. Once you have the basics, start doing it. That will teach you far more than thinking about it forever. Now, Bradley has a comment that he would love to see a program on mediumship and communicating with ancestors. And, maybe we'll make that a topic for one of these programs. And I'm sure that we have some classes in the subject. I'm sure there will be more in the future. But mediumship is one of my specialities. And I have been doing that for 40, more than 40 years, well over 40 years. Um, and working with the ancestors, well, really all of my life. As a child, it was more my mother who was working with them, but I was present. And I learned to work with them uh, beginning as a preteen. So there's a lot I can say about that. But one of the things to understand about working with your ancestors is how you would go about that may depend on who your ancestors were and what your path is. For example, if you're following an Afro-diasporic path or an African traditional religion, um, the way that you might approach your ancestors might be different from how I, as a Corellian, approach my ancestors. Um, and if that is the case, and your ancestors are expecting a particular way for you to approach them, you will want to observe that, of course. But all those different ways of approaching ancestors also work. If you look at the Asian way of approaching ancestors, it can be very different from what some people in the West would do, but it works beautifully. Just ask the people doing it. They have good results. One of the earliest spiritual teachings I remember comes from my grandmother, who observed that people all over the world practicing such diverse religions felt they had good results. And they were often the same results. They were doing the same things. And so the idea that only one of these could be correct was nonsense. Um, and that is very much a point of view that I am devoted to. I believe that all these different ways of doing things are correct for at least some people. And welcome, Heather, who has just joined the chat room. Thank you for joining us. We're nearly at the end of our half hour for today. I hope that you've enjoyed talking about psychic matters. And I'm hoping that as we go forward, this will be a dynamic, interactive program. We've had a certain amount of interaction today. Maybe in the future, I can bring people on to talk with me on camera if they would like. And again, let me know the different kind of things you'd like to see, and we will address that because I'm here for you. And I want to bring you the things that you are curious and interested in. Now, Janet says she reads for a token often, and I tell them to offer whatever their spirit is led to offer. And she'll take food or money or time. And she says if she offered readings frequently, she would set a price. But when I say uh, charge something, this is a perfect example. It doesn't have to be money if you don't want it to be, but they should be doing something. There are some exceptions, but generally speaking, if you ask the person to do something, even if it's to buy you a cup of coffee or to make an offering to their ancestors, if they feel they've done something, they feel invested and they will take it all much more seriously. So those are my thoughts for today on the subject of being a psychic. We talked a little bit about the omnibus. You can find the omnibus and many other publications at CorellianPublishing.com. I mentioned Tarot Thursdays, where I do tarot readings along with Reverend Mary Hawk, who has been in the chat room. And um, you can find that here on Pagan World TV on Thursday nights at 10 p.m. Eastern. And we always have a good time doing that. And I'm going to close with a prayer. And I hope that you've enjoyed the program and that I'll see you again tomorrow. So for our prayer, Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we ask you to guide us when we need guidance and to help us to find our path that is best for us and most in keeping with our higher selves and our higher needs. Help us to be complete in this world and to bring through our highest good. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, may you be blessed now and always. And may you be blessed until next time, and we will see you then.